Welcome to our Tuesday, September the 30th, 2025 session in our series on innovations in AI from Asia. For those of you who weren't here last week, I'm Richard Dasher. I'm the overall host of the series and the instructor of the course. For those of you who are taking the course for credit, I've been receiving a lot of your comments, which I have not answered yet. This will happen when I have a little bit more time in a few days. So please do keep sending the comments. Remember that the class requirement is to send me the comment on each session within 2 weeks of the date of that session. And also send it to Tyler, who is down front. Tyler, stand up real quick. And, make sure you CC Tyler Ho, who is our course assistant. That's for your own safety in case things disappear in my inbox, which they have been known to do. I'm really delighted today to be able to welcome the co-host of our series for the presentation today. Shixiang Shane Gu is a senior staff research scientist at Google DeepMind. And you and I have cooperated on several programs in the past. And so when we were thinking about putting together this program on innovations in AI, I knew I had to have somebody from the inside. Really appreciate Shane for helping out, and we'll be sharing the posting with me in some of the sessions and will stand in for me in one of the sessions. So I really appreciate his cooperation in that, and also introducing a lot of the other speakers in the series. The lineup is finalizing. It's becoming set, and I'm more excited to see what kind of speakers we're able to bring in this quarter. So at Google DeepMind, Shane is leading a team on the Gemini thinking and post-training. And previously, he led the multilingual team for Gemini post-training. He's also spent some time working at OpenAI on the ChatGPT team. He's been a visiting associate professor at the University of Tokyo. He got his PhD in machine learning from two institutions, Cambridge University in England and the Max Planck Institute for Intelligent Systems. He's been a visiting Stanford Computer Science Department in the past. He's also been featured in the MIT Technology Review. So we're delighted that Shane can explain to us how you got here first, and also talk a little bit more about the human, the world, and AI. Shane, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay, thank you very much for inviting. Kind of excited to kind of give this talk. I've been quite busy with kind of Gemini and all the devs kind of recently, but I think it's quite important to kind of convey message. So kind of happy to be kind of here. So in today's talk, I can talk about sort of overview for GenAI technology. I'll talk about China, Japan, based on kind of stories I know over the past 10 years. The first message I kind of want to really convey is like every one of us should really kind of think beyond technology, models, and Silicon Valley. And I'll kind of, I think as I talk, probably will become kind of clear why it's impactful. So to kind of build on here's the intro. I'm a Japan-born Chinese Canadian. Don't know what it means. PhD in UK and Germany, and then I'm currently working full-time in the US for the past 7 years at Google Brain, and then also DeepMind. I'm also kind of angel investor on the side as well. But basically, kind of my journey in research has kind of started out from more foundational algorithms. So, for example, how do you propagate gradients through neural network with discrete variables? Just we're kind of using like image generation model like DALL-E by OpenAI. And then I got very excited about robotics when I saw the reinforcement in games, but they have maybe applied to robotics. So at one point, I've also kind of led the Google Brain's dexterity kind of moonshots with Igor Mordach, who's also kind of ex-OpenAI kind of researcher who came back to Google Brain. And then at OpenAI, I was in the ChatGPT post-training team as a senior researcher, but I also kind of felt that was a critical time for OpenAI to enter the market. Like Mr. Altman, and then brought him to Japan. Here's like a news article from 2.5 years ago, and that's Sam, and then the guy next to him is basically me. ChatGPT post training, and I came back to Google 2 years ago. And that was basically time of like fall. So basically post training recipe really hasn't been mature. So we kind of sprinted to make better recipe. That's pretty much now the core team. And then like a year and a half or a year, I basically led the post trainings multilingual side. So if anything happens to non-English comes to me, and some of the problem was actually much more deeper than we thought. Actually kind of led to a lot of discovery even at the XOA kind of compiler kind of level. And currently I shifted the focus to work more on the scaling the RL, in science for RL in the large language models. I'd like to kind of talk about the GenAI for the past 20 years. I kind of made this bigger, like I think I made that like simpler version of this like 2 years ago, and I kind of made it for like nerds last year. But essentially, like there are four stages of like AI that I recall. First stage is basically like what I call like Age of Pioneer, 2006 to 14. That's really like when people kind of first found out that neural network can scale, like after the AI winter. So back then it was basically like like 4 or 5 labs, Hinton, Benjo, Lacroix, McHoover in, and basically they're core students, and a few researchers at Google, Microsoft. They're kind of like the only relevant players. They're sort of like early hackers and weavers. So they really kind of hacked the CUDA when the library was still kind of bad, and they kind of made things work. They're the true kind of believers in like deep learning. And 2014 to 18, that's kind of what I did my PhD. Essentially, I call it like Age of Algorithm, because this is kind of when things got so much easier because of the Theano, TensorFlow, Chainer, PyTorch, JAX. Like you don't need to do any kind of CUDA engineering, and they can do deep learning. So this is kind of where like people who kind of know math, people who kind of know engineering, people who sort of like creative, I think had kind of fun time. I think I'll say kind of I was one of them. And I kind of quite enjoy this like algorithmic explorations. 2018 to 22 is really like hyperscaler thing. And I think the winner at the time is basically OpenAI. So essentially that's kind of when people kind of who believe, okay, after the algorithmic exploration, what kind of algorithm scale? And then what kind of architecture scale? You really scale it. You really kind of believe it. You put 100x more compute, and who did it first, basically kind of leave some kind of benefits. But what I kind of call like 2022 onward is really like age for applications, UX, and business. And this is really like when the AI, past 10 years of deep learning research, actually became so impactful and so generalizable that essentially there's a lot of business opportunity made. So essentially, like this is the kind of how I describe it. And kind of how I derive this, I can also talk long. It's still going to continue, because essentially GenAI is powered by 3 powerful forces. One is basically prediction. And the key aspect is this thing called Solomon induction. The core idea is very simple. Basically, prediction leads to understanding. So essentially, it's kind of saying that the best model to predict, for example, what word come next or what frame in the video come next, is a model that basically understands the causal nature of the world, causal nature of the program that generate the data. So as you basically scale the prediction model optimization, you naturally derive understanding. And I basically define understanding as ability to infer the causal mechanism of phenomena. That's pretty much like grokking as studied by AI researchers, aha moment, sentiment neuron that work from before, is kind of all that. And the prediction still scaling very strongly. Reinforcement learning. So, with supervised learning, you're basically just like learning from impatient data. But what you can also do with reinforcement learning is that you can, the 2 things actually do. You can do reinforcement learning to improve prediction, which you can basically actively find the region of data where prediction is wrong, and you can predict it. The other is basically you can sort of like, maybe that kind of explains everything. Another thing is like, could be like kind of, like empowerment, or never mind. Okay, but anyways, basically reinforcement learning is, synthetic data that AI model acts in the world, or generate the samples, self-evaluate, or have some kind of feedback from the world, and have the loop to reinforce it. Basically, the internet data is going to run out at the current rate of scaling. So essentially, like from now on, and I think the past 1 year, it was extremely clear that reinforcement learning, the way of synthetic data and reinforcement learning is kind of way to really unlock the next breakthrough. So basically reinforcement is like going very strong. But third is also co-evolution. There's really like AI and humans collaborating, learn from each other. So right now, since say 2-3 months ago, Google's coding tool become much better. And I was really happy because now I can work 2 times faster than before. And now probably, later it's gonna be like 10x, whatever. So it's really kind of exciting, this sort of like what humans can do with the AI. And also humans can also learn from AI. There's a kind of famous move 78 moment in AlphaGo, is pretty much like when human kind of made a play that really like surprised the AI. So it kind of went, and the human kind of like got like 1 game win. And right now, the Terence Tao, like top mathematicians are working with Gemini, top models, and I'm pretty sure the data coming out from there is something we never can produce. Maybe with human alone, maybe for the next few hundred years, if you only active with humans. So the co-evolution is really like what's going to drive extremely high quality data for prediction and reinforcement. All right, another thing I can talk about is the 80-100 rule. Like I just made up the word. Essentially, like, and it's also important to understand what each field is. So basically, AI has 3 kind of algorithms. One is offline supervised learning. Offline supervised learning is kind of like you're watching YouTube video of like say a person playing tennis, and just from that try to play tennis. So it's not gonna be good. It's not. I mean, that analogy was not perfect, but essentially, it's limited. You may get like 80%, but it's very efficient because we're very good. We have very good supervised learning algorithm. The next stage is really just kind of post-training, which is like what I kind of call online supervised learning. So what is online supervised learning? Basically, what it means is that you basically can actively find place where the supervised learning kind of get wrong and correct it. The kind of popular algorithms like RHF, Dagger, Gale, all those things, to my mind, is pretty much kind of all fit into this region of algorithm. The lastly is basically online reinforcement learning. So the stage 2 is basically kind of bound by human. Basically, kind of human has to be in the loop and then deciding, or nature is kind of in the loop and it's kind of deciding what's the limit, what's 100%. But for some kind of things, you can get the computer to kind of give feedback or have, say, robot experiments. I think today there was a periodic labs launched by ex-colleague of mine from Google Brain, OpenAI, basically to automate the lab science or material science. And then for those kind of things, you can really kind of get feedback from automation. So for these, it's basically getting feedback from the world. So you're basically not bounded. The 100% just kind of made up. So, that's like mass coding science. We're going to see like a lot of explosion and kind of breakthrough. Of course, like it kind of depends on like rate at which you can get the feedback. So, math and science, like math and coding was very fast, but lab science, how many signals per time is kind of more bound. So, but essentially those are kind of 3 ways you should think about the AI when you look at it. And for example, like GPT-3, VO3, I'll say is pretty much a stage 1 kind of breakthrough. And then the ChatGPT is kind of more like stage 2. And then the recent sort of kind of math and stuff and language models that. Another kind of thing. Okay, maybe I'll show this later. Another thing is basically like we already got pretty much all the models that we need. And my sort of kind of pitch is that LLMs and video models are all we need. Almost all we need. And here's the reason. Essentially, the world consists of symbols, space, and time. Sure, there's some information in audio and that, but most of the rich information I think are captured in this kind of 3 modes. And the language model is the best way to basically capture symbolic reasoning. And video model is the best way, given the available data and the architecture availability, efficiency, best way to capture space-time information. So back in 2022, we wrote this pretty much a meme paper, kind of fun, which is you just add lessons step by step to LLM, basically does reasoning. This was the most tweeted paper of 2022. And if I claim credit, it apparently convinced Jimmy Bao for XAI to stop the professorship and then going to fund XAI with Elon Musk. we just put up a paper 2-3 days ago, also called similar title, Video Models of Zero-Shot Learner and Reasoning. And basically the reason is that you guys probably know a bunch of AI generated videos, but they're not just, okay. So for example, here, it's basically like a maze, but basically you just prompt the video model, it can solve the maze. Then actually even has come a sound where it basically eat the cheese and then yeah, so I get where it comes from. You can also prompt it to solve robotics. So so you can kind of imagine like if you have some background in robotics, maybe in the future. Of course, we are not there, and I'm not claiming everything, but in the future, the robotic will be done by taking an image, prompting the video model, you will generate the video, and that video basically will resolve planning, semantics, common sense, dexterity, affordance, all those things in the video. And the only thing you need to do is basically visual circle. Next, basically given like a frame like a 0.1 second later, how do you kind of like how do you get there? Which is basically just like a form of IK, supervised learning. I think this is like one sample from the RKGI. So I think a lot of the failure modes for LLM is really space-time. So RKGI is kind of full of that. Video models already, without any kind of explicit thinking, already do some of it. And this is actually one of the hardest tasks, I think, input dexterity. And you can already do that. And just like look at this. I can go on, but basically like high resolution, like VO is amazing. And we didn't train VO. This is just an eval paper from VO. Yeah, we're very excited about where this kind of leads. Essentially, once you kind of show on the eval, this is kind of feasible beyond some region, you can just like use RL to kind of hill climb it. And then just to kind of share, right? Basically, the past 3 years actually was like not too much surprise for me, if I kind of try to be fair. The surprise is basically like 1 million context. I was very surprised. Diffusion, I was pretty surprised because those two, I think, I just mathematically, I just didn't really see how it was kind of feasible. But that's surprising was really like ChatGPT, AI agents, and coding, lip sync text models, DeepMind's come back. Because in 2022, I basically already kind of saw like elements as social reasoners, and then show like early results for imagine video, text video model, and Dream Fusion. So it was basically very clear, like essentially, like imagine video may have been like 10-20% of the supervised learning kind of scaling, but once it works, right, you just kind of like scale it. Given a model size, given a froth, so it was very clear that you can scale. Just to kind of end the GenAI kind of talk. By the way, I tried to kind of rush through the slides, given the request from Richard, and then, but we're gonna have like a discussion session like afterwards. Essentially, the next 1 to 5 years, we're gonna see the AI agent gonna grow in 2 axes. One is autonomy. Autonomy is basically like minutes per intervention. This is like a metric actually tweeted by Jimmy Ba. And then task complexity. Essentially, like it's kind of like self-driving. Essentially, like how many minutes can it operate by itself? And I think right now, just the Anthropic 4.5, they just published like 30 hours for one kind of example, for coding example. So this is definitely kind of increasing. And then the grounding. So really the richness of understandable world. So, and I think this grounding is very important. So what I mean by grounding is really like how much of the world does the AI understand and act in? Can the AI act in? So multimodality, obviously kind of important for understanding, like the video model, like the LM multimodal model, but also the action. And I think one of the things that's actually like very underemphasized is real time. So people kind of work on the Genie from DeepMind, where the video model, very high resolution, actually real time interactable. So now basically the video model can sort of real time interact with a human and give it feedback. There's a bit more to do, but or like audio to audio model. So people kind of talk audio to audio with kind of people. But essentially these are very important because what we want AI is like, we don't want AI to just kind of sit in the chat text box. We want AI to be in the looking at the browser. We want AI to be looking at through like wearable glasses. We want the AI to be looking through human. We want the AI to be here. And then when I say something wrong, the AI can correct me on the spot. So we want the AI to be immersive in the world. And there's so much space to scale. So just don't believe any kind of like block and stuff. So much to do. Okay, now I'll start talking about China. Okay, so nothing against any of it. I think both are very good. And okay, forget it. But the one thing I kind of say about China is essentially it's not just DeepSeek. So if you look at the sys leaderboard, so I just looked at it like yesterday. On the text, on the say coding, web dev, on the text video kind of stuff, it's basically top 3-4 frontier lab from Google, from US and Chinese companies. So it's not just DeepSeek. The level of competition, the level of talent, the level of saturation in China domestically is insane. And it's also not just software. So don't do this. I don't recommend it. Like AI remembers it. Like this guy is gonna be chased first by the AI. Not good, not good. Yeah. But essentially, like they're extremely strong in robotics, and then I think Unitree is kind of pretty famous. But really, like, it kind of started from like, DJI, really like owning the drone space, then a lot of that. So basically, I'm going to talk about like, it's not just software, it's not just DeepSeek, it's fundamentally like kind of like strengths about China. And I'm going to explain like what I kind of saw in the past 15 years as like a researcher. So one thing to say is it's not sudden. So if you look at 2012, who cared about deep learning, right? Who cared about deep learning? Sure, decent amount of people got very excited about ImageNet, but we're pretty much researchers, right? And then there was still like, I still remember like a debate about, say, like UC Berkeley's top vision professor and Jeff Hinton arguing like, oh, you can do classification, but you cannot do this, like 10 vision tasks. So basically in 2012, who actually believed in deep learning? Actually just Google, DeepMind, which is basically Google, and Baidu and Microsoft. Those are the 4 companies that bidded for Jeff Hinton. Baidu had a researcher called Caillou. I remember because I'm old. And Microsoft had a research called Eden. They basically like knew it. So it's basically Chinese researcher at Microsoft and Baidu and Google. Those are the only ones who actually believe in deep learning in 2012. Microsoft Research Asia, 1998, it was founded. And this is actually one of the source for the strengths. So even right now, I wouldn't say they are big sort of frontier foreign IT AI lab in Asia, where a lot of foreign researchers are present who are very mainstream, who are like top of the field in acting. As I look at AI startup in Japan or Asia, I don't see it. Maybe in China, like there's kind of way more. But Microsoft Research Asia was pretty much the source for a lot of people from like Asia. Even when I talked to some Japanese PhDs who decided to do PhD in the US, they interned at Microsoft Research Asia in Beijing. And then from there, they basically got to know that this is, it's very exciting to work with global talents. Because, like research, one is like, it's also a very close community. At least like when the research is very exploratory, you need a sort of like sensitivity and creativity and sort of like level of depth and taste of Western researchers. So I would say this is kind of source. And who told me the story? So I was invited to give a talk because there was a Chinese student who basically really liked my research, so I kind of gave a talk. And then there was Xiao Tang. This was 8 years ago, I think. Xiao Tang is actually very famous among, I think, a lot of Chinese researchers. I don't know about this generation, but he's like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, he was very famous because that's the time when most of the Chinese researchers are like computer vision researchers. He basically kind of told me a very interesting story. He basically said, I can't hire top Chinese students from Hong Kong, but I can get them to do masters. And I teach them how to do research the Western way, publish 4 or 5 papers, and send them off to MIT, Stanford. I screw them, off. So he basically did that for many years. And then, his lab at the time, there are like assistant professors who basically were his ex-students who went to MIT to PhD and came back. A lot of the strengths, top researchers kind of genes, and then this kind of build up. Like research is a build up, engineering is a build up. You need the top people mentoring top students, and they mentor top student. It requires a build up. They've been kind of building this. So I don't know, like, obviously, like I I haven't spent as much time, or I was in China only for middle school. So I don't know the full sort of community in high school, university right now, especially the past 5 years, maybe. So really, I think this was like one of the foundation. Microsoft Research Asia, this was like one of the kind of game changing. And then sort of like researcher like him who don't try to like constrain the talents to stay domestically. We're behind. We need to send the students kind of over, and then we had to kind of build a strength. So I don't know all the extents. I literally only had like 30-minute chat with them. But that was like extremely memorable moment. Other memorable moments. A junior assistant professor at Shanghai University in Shanghai had 200 students, even when he was a second year assistant professor. And 190 of them were undergrad students from this often from competitive coding class. And most of them over the summer will go to internship at US labs because US lab already had plenty of Chinese researchers doing PhD there. I mentored one of them. He wrote a pretty good paper, unfortunately, because authors are all Chinese and then there wasn't too much PR. Naming doesn't matter. He later went to do PhD at Stanford. I think he dropped out and then he's doing startup now. At ByteDance headquarters, I basically all the people I saw seemed younger than me. 100 Alibaba visit, CD Brain. And then there was one conversation with a veteran professor in Shanghai that I particularly remember. Basically, he said, Shane, enjoy your research freedom while you're at Google Brain. So you won't be able to just write papers, but contribute to real products. We call that rule D in Chinese. And then, because when Chinese AI research engineers were 200% focused on the impact, we raised the bar for global competition. To be fair, he was 75% correct, because I would say the OpenAI with ChatGPT did it first, but now with DeepSeek and all the competition from Chinese labs, it's basically kind of happening. We can't just write exploratory papers. We have to be very laser focused on what makes the impact. Another kind of fun. So when I was at OpenAI, there was a lot of things that happened. I don't want to go into it, but there some information. I don't know who what's your view on information. Just sort of. But basically, they wrote the article, and then among the names, actually, I was only East Asian. And then actually at the time, I didn't notice it because I got so used to publishing paper with Western researchers. So I actually didn't notice this. But afterwards, especially when I saw Meta super intelligence that, whereas more than half the people are Chinese friends from Tsinghua and then Stanford. Oh my God, okay, this is a very different age now. I should have written more paper with Chinese researchers. It's kind of lesson for me. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of kind of overview for China. But really what you kind of emphasize it's not a very gradual kind of development. Okay, let me go for Japan. I was born and raised in Japan. So until 12 years old, I only spoke Japanese. My wife is Japanese, and then I basically love Japan. But I'll try to stay objective in the global standard when I talk about Japan. I would say Japan's a Galapagos in terms of IT, global talents, and AI. In the past 10 years, how many top Japanese research do you know in the mainstream? I know, say, some examples Spectral GAN by Miyato, who's a good friend of mine, Stream Diffusion Kodaira, he's now doing PhD at UC Berkeley. But really, given the size of the economy and given how fast they sort of become a developed country in Asia, I wouldn't say they're impressive. And I would say the reason is past 30 years, they emphasize on English education. Past 20 years, they emphasize on IT education. In the past 10 years, they emphasize on deep learning. There are different reasons for that. Students, I mentor some of them, they're smart, but they don't know because they're not connected with the community here. They don't know what's mainstream. They don't know what's impactful. They're hardworking, but I don't think they have the mission. Okay. These are all subjective opinions. I was going to visit Research Area of Tokyo, and there definitely are a lot of individuals I want to empower. But I really kind of want to be kind of clear about where they're at. Well, then basically ChatGPT was a big wake-up call. I would say until then, they didn't pay as much attention to AI or even to kind of fund it. I went on like YouTube channel, it has like 600K views. I basically talking, and I actually even talk about like Solomonov induction. And like one Japanese businessman was like, oh, hey, Shane, I liked your talk about the Solomonov induction. So the thing about Japan is like, they're very smart. And some like top business people actually were good at math back in high school, but then decided to do like a non-engineering, rather than like, becoming the part of, those like top mass kind of students, right? Kind of going into that, they basically decide to do more outside, because in Japan, the sort of society and that kind of value more of the managers, more like seniority and those kinds of things. I can kind of go on and on. But ChatGPT was kind of big wake up call. And then if you look at like, if for like a year or something, if you go to like a Japanese bookstore, which is still kind of everywhere, this is like typical thing you see. Like, it's not just like a technical section, this is like a mainstream like business section. Like business section will be kind of full of ChatGPT books for business. And then in fact, like one of the kind of interesting thing about Japan is like one of the top usage for Japan is brainstorming. Because rather than sort of like, I don't know about about you guys kind of usage, but rather than using to, study or basically they kind of use the top business people. They use that to brainstorm. They use that to kind of think about ideas. So the penetration within the business community was actually very high in Japan. Also, in general, Japan is a very strong like early adopters. So in 2023, the ChatGPT was basically ranked third, only after US and India. And because of similar sort of early adopter culture, Cursor, Deb, and Manus, they also target Japan market from very early on, because they can see this initial flux, which is very surprising for many of them. I talked, I think, Cursor co-founder as well. He was also very surprised. Early adopter, very strong, very educated, very like committed. So initial kind of stuff, very big. Even government. So this is Yokosuka, is like one of the kind of place near Tokyo, but essentially they actually adopted within governments in April of 2023. To kind of help. So that's like only like 3-4 months after ChatGPT, like 1-2 months after I did that YouTube show. Also, like Japan's a very strong culture fit. I put it like, this is so literally, if you talk with people who grew up in Japan, everyone watched this like old cute anime called Doraemon, where AI is basically not a Terminator. It's your friend, your best buddy. It's pretty dumb. It's kind of like you can prompt ChatGPT or Gemini to be dumb, but it's kind of like dumb. Then it's very friendly, and then kind of always with. So basically, Japan has been thinking about AGI before the internet. That's kind of one thing. There's also this like religious kind of stuff called 8 million gods. So basically, the Shintoism has thing like everything. Clothes, it's really like Japan really kind of values the resource. It's an island nation, it really values the resource. When I was kind of child, they kind of told me really like, every grain, like don't leave any grain on your rice, right? Like, because every grain, is valuable. So they kind of believe in that, but they really kind of believe in sort of everything has a god. So they sort of kind of feel more easier to get emotionally attached to inanimate kind of objects or kind of non-humans. And then they are very aware of the urgent societal need. So they have low birth rates in the aging society. So basically, Japanese politicians, business people, they know very clearly that if Japan doesn't fully adopt AI in the next 10, 15 years, they're going to collapse. They know this. And yeah, I don't think it's a culture for rapid influx of immigration. So they had to rely on AI. So so I'm kind of invited, for example, I wore a suit here. Sometimes you have to suit up. And then he is basically the current digital minister of Japan. So I went there, explained why Gemini is good. When Gemini was like Gemini 1.5, so it was like more setting kind of stuff, but it was good. And I was also on kind of panel with Son Masayoshi. So this is Son Masayoshi, and this is also kind of fun. He's like Jared Kaplan from Anthropic. And then somehow they kind of put me along with Jared, and we kind of talk about it. Apparently their reasoning was basically, first of all, I know Japanese, and then they kind of know me from before. But there is basically like Anthropic, scaling law. And I wrote like things step by step, research, complete scaling. It was quite fun. But essentially the good thing to know if you're thinking about startups of impact, Japanese top leadership really want AI. They know their country is behind. They know their talent's behind, but they want the most incentivized country to fully adopt AI. So that's kind of like one thing. One kind of possible strategy kind of going is really like foundational model, GPU, TPU. It's a lot of build up. Foundational model, of course, but also GPU, TPU, because those have to co-evolve with the foundational model. But what they're kind of doing is, for example, they're investing in a company called Rapidus. So they invested, I think, 11.5 billion. By the way, definitely use the Google AI mode. It's nice. Or maybe this is like Google's AI overview. Yeah. These days it's so easy. Just like type Google, just screenshot it, just kind of put it. But basically the Rapidus is like sponsored by the country. Of course, it's not going to be trivial. They're very competitive. But I may say it's like more likely to succeed than maybe replicating in the US, given the attention to the high quality fabrication that's required. And I think Japan's really good at it. Application side, right? They know they pioneered robotics until 5 or 10 years ago. So they're definitely quite interested. They kind of made like the organization and they're kind of giving compute money, data, like money to basically collect data. But essentially, like one kind of strategy is that maybe we can sort of do really well in the applications layer, maybe some post-training, and then maybe just like energy semiconductor, and that could be a way. But they're definitely kind of multiple discussion happening together. One thing is that Japan's a really big blue ocean. So the most popular AI startup, I won't name it, basically hasn't made any competitive product or model in the past 2 years. It's a wide blue ocean. Silicon Valley startup founders should really think beyond the US from day one. I think here, right, a lot of people are extremely talented. They have a lot of, drive, experience, a lot of kind of background. Even when I go to YC, I'm pretty impressed by just a lot of people's kind of background. But often I feel the Silicon Valley is also like sort of a closed bubble, where you kind of really kind of try to kind of build maybe like 10s, 20s of the most popular applications. I think that's kind of waste of the talents and the resource. And I think they should really kind of look beyond, because I think when you look beyond Silicon Valley, there are like a lot of opportunities. Lastly, I said are like hopefully objective, but definitely somewhat subjective. But essentially what I kind of value is kind of how to make Japan fundamentally strong over the past 50 years. So I really care about how a country can be fundamentally stronger. Ending message, GenAI, a lot of room for growth. Autonomy, grounding, still a big room and growth. Just a lot of work for me. That's why last week I couldn't come. There's always more work to do. China is not just DeepSeek. It's the result of past 20 years of extremely careful build-up of sending talents, encouraging global mainstream competition from within. Japan, it's behind in tech, but it's awakened. It's one of the least competitive places to do a startup for AI, with a lot of potential for upside, and you can enjoy sushi. One kind of message is like, find the area where there's research, engineering, product, or business with very high impact remaining divided by top talent ratio. This is kind of typically the metric I really kind of care about. It's really like, I feel every phenomena, right, has a finite impact to be made. And there's the timing. And then there's also the amount of top talents working on it. As the impact is being made, right, more top talents will grow. So basically this ratio will collapse. But there are always more things to do. So that's basically the end. Thank you very much for inviting.
Great. The floor to audience questions in just a few minutes. But I've got a couple of things that I'd like to ask.
Sure. Yeah.
Standard sit, however you want to do it from this point. You may want to use your slides. So with regard to sort of the technology side of your presentation today, how do you see, the limits of GenAI? Do you think that GenAI will be the only kind of AI that persists, or?
GenAI is a very abused term.
Okay, so the term is a problem.
But as I kind of say, like LLMs and video models,
Yeah.
are kind of most of what you need. So for some modality of the data, for example, like AlphaFold and stuff, it's very valuable to craft a very custom architecture.
Yeah.
Usually those are those are, for example, not present on like everyday world, right? Like going through that. So for those regime where like high quality data is very constrained, whether it's like the original data or feedback data is very constrained, very slow. After the product, basically the progress is going to be slower. And then the thing to think about is really like, how can you use, for example, there's like tons of YouTube video, there's tons of, internet data. What kind of general capabilities from these that you can transfer for your custom kind of data? That's kind of way to think about it, I think.
Okay.
And then it's also like sometimes maybe you just ditch it, and then, for example, like weather forecasting, like DeepMind published like a custom model, or before this kind of custom model. If you want, you can do those with video model, right? You can just video sort of doing that. But what else kind of good idea?
So I kind of wanted to ask you about that. Do you think that things should go to just bigger and bigger unitary models, or do you think multiple models?
Well, 99% of things it should go to unitary model, is my opinion.
Okay. And
because the thing is like you never know what kind of stuff transfer.
Yeah.
You never know like this, doing safety better, doing like self-evaluation better. All those things sort of could transfer to other things. So the reason I kind of sort of hang out in the post-training kind of regime is that it's sort of like this infinite trade-off, but also observing like infinite amortization that, you kind of like every task help the other task.
Yeah. So I said something last week that I want to give you a chance to either disagree with violently or agree with. It's up to you. I said that hallucinations are a feature of GenAI and not a bug.
Yeah.
And the percentages are going down. How do you think we'll solve the problem?
Yeah, so I have a 3-year-old daughter. And then when I see this sort of like reasoning of like, oh, the reasoning is fake or something, I disagree. Because my 3-year-old's reasoning is probably 80% hallucinations. But she's doing reasoning. And then, so what differentiates, my quick answer, what differentiates AI and human is that human has a world consequence. If you forget the birthday of your manager, or depend on where you're at, then maybe you're fired. If you make certain kind of mistakes, you die. So basically survival, the world outcome, basically learning from a world outcome is what differentiates the LLM AI these days from the human. But if the LLM sort of become more like, that Doraemon, live among us and actually get penalized for that, I think they're going to act very closely. In fact, post-training is very close to that. Post-training is basically simulating that kind of process. So to me, that's like I hallucinate all the time. The reasonings of humans are full hallucinations. So a lot of code.
If there weren't, we wouldn't be very creative, for one thing.
Exactly. So I embrace hallucinations. I like it. And then I read the paper from that OpenAI. One author was a good friend of mine from Google Brain.
Yeah.
It's kind of clear there. There are a few ways to remedy it, but very high level, I think that's pretty much it.
So maybe kind of on the technical side, on a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 being the very early stages, the pioneer stages of AI, what number would you give us now? On a scale of 1 to 100.
Okay.
If we started at 1 back in 2012 with deep learning, okay. How far along are we? How much? You say we've gotten to 10 or how far have we gotten?
I think we are like 60.
Really? Okay. So then I have to ask you, is there a good kind of clear, quick and simple way to give a definition to agentic AI and AGI that will be kind of, so because people are, like you say,
Okay.
people
So,
use the
when
terms
people ask
already.
me what's the definition for AGI,
Yeah.
my answer is always like AGI is not to define, it's to feel. This is very important because I think there is a meme by Ilya Sutskever. So Ilya is a founder of OpenAI. He was my manager. I only worked with him for 6 months, and after that, he went to OpenAI. Opened up OpenAI, but we didn't work together. So that was like the only time I worked. But he has like feel the AGI or something like that. Don't want to
Yeah.
like a meme. But I think that's very important because like that's really exploratory science, right? What we kind of rely on is your feeling and the taste.
Yeah.
I think right now, a lot of research, I think, agree with me, like the best people to find to work with, the people who are aligned with you, who have the best taste. And to me, like, if you're not excited about AGI, if you don't feel the scaling in the AI models of today, then to me, like, that is, that's fair. That's not we can discuss, but basically we feel the AGI.
Okay, okay. So, kind of.
Oh, I do have I do have a definition, but I mean not.
No, that's okay. I think that's a very good description. You feel it. You'll know it when you see it. About the kind of China and Japan side of things. So you were talking about the development of human resources in China, where a lot of young people started early and then they went to, top universities in the US or Europe. Then they've gone back. One of the things that I remember the dean of engineering at Stanford telling me one time is that the half-life of most of the knowledge we teach in engineering classes is about 3 years. Meaning that half of what you're taught now is not going to be worth
I
anything.
think AI is way shorter.
And it's even shorter in AI. So where I'm going with that is, what is it in China that has encouraged these young people to really spread their wings so fast after getting a good education?
So I did my undergrad in Toronto in Canada.
Okay.
I don't think I can answer that.
Okay.
Maybe some of the audience can answer.
Okay. Okay. It's
I
something
mean,
to think
I
about.
have I have guesses and I have understanding, but yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I
Okay.
think each person has a different opinion.
No, I do think that it's really important to recognize the quality of the HR going into something, but it's also what happens to them. You were saying that the Japanese people involved are very hardworking,
Well,
but maybe not so ambitious.
Japan, there's also a good reason, which in Japan is just very comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, okay. A certain amount of lack of comfort does motivate. There's an awful lot of
I
innovation.
think the level of competition, I only did middle school, and the real competition really kicks in, from high school and at university. But given the level of competition, I think there's definitely like more incentive outside. But also, right, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you want to do the frontier area research, you had to come to the US, you had to come, go outside and to Europe, Canada, to that. So that's also, they're very objective, they're very impact driven. So when they evaluate the methodology, they know what's behind, they know what's fake, they know what's real.
Do you think the US made a mistake by training so many foreign students?
I think US gained a lot. US, the reason that's basically number one, I think it's still gonna stay basically number one. I'm basically staying here. It's really this kind of culture and the build up. I think US had kind of more to gain.
Okay. So we're starting to get questions on Zoom. Let me open the floor to a couple of audience questions first. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Hank, for being here.
Please speak up. This is kind of a big room and it's hard to hear.
Okay. Thank you for being here. And my question is that since you're working on Gemini and we have realized that this year has been a really uptake year for all the video generation models and everything. And especially I feel like in terms of production scale models, it's getting more and more incorporated into like professional level production workflows. So I'm wondering, in terms of like model training, what has been fundamentally changed to drive this kind of advancement? And another question is, how would you like think about like data limitation issue going forward for video training?
Yeah. So I cannot talk about anything about the model and training. But and then in terms of like overall, why kind of Google this year, I think it's good. I'm definitely not, it's above my pay grade to kind of answer that. But my sort of kind of opinion is that essentially 2 years ago when I came back, right, the DeepMind was like, because it's more like foundational, right? It's gonna go with great AI scientists, right? Then us, so it's really, and then frontier LM, right, involves like huge commitment and then huge kind of focus. So I think it wasn't sure, and also probably from DeepMind side, the uncertainty was, obviously the search has to grow, right? Has to be renovated step by step. I think right now we're in a really good trajectory, but is the Google ready to fully embrace AI? Google, I think, was also kind of wondering, is a DeepMind who basically like missed out this initial LGBT, right? In a way, is this the actual work that we can hold this on now? But for the past, after that, right, for the next 1-2 years, they work very closely, and then models got bigger, better and better, and then the wider product integration is very critical. The frontier sort of pushing on kind of video models, and then also language model like long context. A lot of those things are really that. So I think this year's Google I/O was I was really emotional. Like I was really happy about it because so Dennis Hassabis and then Sundar Pichai kind of basically stand side by side. It really, I think, kind of showed the intent that Google is ready to change. It's going to fully embrace AI, and it's going to be probably going to deploy the AI most responsibly, I think. And then the DeepMind is also sort of like ready. That it can make frontier model. It can get the best sort of, not just the academic benchmark, but also the user experience. Do that very well.
You call this one is from Zoom. You call the current age this kind of age of
UX,
business and AI and
UX.
UX.
Yeah.
So question is, what industries do you think are the most exciting to be transformed by AI?
Yeah. Good question. I think to me the technology is still being like underestimated. I think some people think that you just like call Gemini and then it's just gonna work. No, like we're not promising that. I think nobody's promising that. I can do a lot of everyone's gonna work. It's gonna get better. And if you're gonna collect this kind of post-training data for your own task, it's gonna get better and better. And you can use that as a rack. You can use that as a prompt. You can kind of drop it. So to me, the technology is still underestimated in different industry. Business side to me is kind of overestimated because I feel even if you can do with technology, it's not like business is gonna change. People won't embrace 100% purist capitalism. There are people in the society.
Yeah.
You cannot just fire 95% of the people all the day. That's just not going to happen. So I think the business side need to be more careful in terms of keeping expectations and then be solid. Disclose, how much money you're burning in the pre-training, the post-training, and then how much leverage, right? Even if you make the best model in the world, what's the shelf life? You should be much more transparent by that. And we kind of focus more on like end-to-end integration. You not only make foundational model, but also kind of make the frontier application that you can make business with. Otherwise, I think it's not sustainable. So that's kind of my feedback.
Okay, that's great. Let's open to the floor. Let me ask you first and then you, okay? Go ahead.
You mentioned that you believe that large models were good enough for maybe 99% of a lot of different sorts of. And then what would you say are some of those areas or sectors where you really do require a complex model that's specialized to that sector or to that business or to that area?
So typically it's actually the other way right now. Like right now, the custom model is more for like efficiency. Like it's like, you're only gonna do this one single task. So you basically like have a very small model to do that very cheaply. That's kind of thing. The extensive ones, like again, maybe talk differently. But for this one, right, you still kind of need a very good big model to do it. Of course, there often kind of few discussions on what's that, and then but overall, I think having a very reliable frontier big model is going to empower so much things. And I cannot talk about swing, but like from the data to the final model, right? There are like a lot of places that you can use a very big model. I cannot talk about it, but essentially it's gonna make, even if it doesn't go directly into the model, even manipulation, there's so many places it can help that I think is still the big model.
Do you think the energy use is going to cause people to try to do a fundamental shift away from big models at some point?
I think the business energy limitations definitely will. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think this sort of custom inference chip market is pretty hot these days. So yeah, inference companies, who can basically serve the model for cheaper price, it's going to be very competitive. And I think there'll be a lot of value added because now even the small models are getting very reliable. So people kind of want to, it's sort of kind of become more affordable to deploy at wide scale for like even kind of big businesses.
Okay, right. I saw your hand somewhere there. Go ahead.
Hey.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is a question sort of about interpretability. I think in an early slide you said understanding equals prediction
Yeah.
in terms of the future.
Yeah.
I just wonder how important you feel it is that we sort of share in that understanding, as it were, and we comprehend the understanding that underlies the prediction that's being made. And are there any constraints if we don't? And yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there are basically like three types of reasoning researcher, I kind of see philosophies. One is basically like those basically who think the reasoning stuff are just compute. Like you don't care what's happening inside. You just scale it, more compute the better. And then, just kind of get, the second is more like thinking the reasoning as alignment between the post-training and the pre-training. Because like most of the capabilities still come from pre-training. So basically, if the reasoning is not in the natural language, then obviously, like, it's going to be very done. The third is more like product, right? So, when you do kind of reasoning, what's the optimal length? For this question, you should reason this, kind of that. So these are kind of more like discussion about like, how can you kind of make the reasoning better and through philosophies. I talked to like all three types of people. And then I generally kind of feel, yeah, actually all three ways of thinking is definitely important to kind of design, what works. But in terms of kind of answering your question, I think it is very critical. It's very critical to align the reasoning, to at least make sure that there's no like misaligned or like how is it called, like essentially like sort of like a line in the reasoning that's kind of doing something on the kind of behind. So I think a few folks in alignment and then the safety are definitely looking at this and kind of exploring this issue. But and actually, when I talk to people outside LM, like some researcher I really respect, he thinks like, oh no, reasoning, like no, it should just be like soft.
No,
thoughts.
that's okay. Thanks for stopping.
And,
Was it
shouldn't be
okay
interpretable.
yesterday?
Like, it's just a compute. It could be, it could be kind of powerful, but I want the reasoning to kind of stay in the human language. Of course, that may limit the AI capability to that 100% regime or kind of constrain the AI space. But I think we're pretty good at inventing data format. We're pretty good at inventing language. So if the AI needs that, we can give. But I always kind of want to make sure that whatever AI is understanding, reasoning, or generating, I want to be able to understand it and debug it.
So one of our long-term contacts in Japan asks for your opinions on cooperation between Japan and China in the field of AI. Now, there's a whole point about cooperation and competition.
Yeah.
Right. So let's put the US into this. And how does this move forward in the best possible way and the way you think it really will move?
Yeah, my kind of short answer is like, I think dynamic between the US and China are predictable. I feel the US is gonna put more resource to this kind of industry of kind of AI to make sure that kind of top players kind of stay top. China, to me, the limitation for them is like, even if they make the best application or best model, they're severely limited to access to the global markets, especially in the current geopolitical sort of climate. So I think this is why China is basically like actively sponsoring to open source, open weight models, because that basically will weaken the sort of top frontier labs in the US. To me, those is kind of very predictable dynamics.
So that
So-
kind of explains why so much is open source in China opposed to here,
Yeah,
or it's one reason.
to me, it's like one of the big reasons. I think here there's way less reason to open weight and open source. So this is kind of controversial, but it takes a lot of effort and resource to kind of build the frontier, and then definitely like given the current intensity, we miss sort of before the ChatGPT time.
Yeah.
So, you know, like people from different labs can just talk freely at conferences.
Yeah.
Hard feeling. There's like no kind of coaching of patterns, but right now it's very intense. So realistically, I think it's gonna be tougher here than in China.
Do you think that because America seems to be more deal with, you will see more tendency toward cooperation between Japan and China? Because the US seems more difficult to deal with, do you think you'll see more cooperation between Japan and China?
I can answer that.
Okay, I think that's a great answer. Who knows? None of us know. So questions from the floor? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, how do you compare China and Japan in terms of the physical AI domain, which is now becoming very, very popular?
Japan, China. China's way ahead.
There.
Because Japan may have some of the, for example, like 7 years ago, I met the Japanese engineer who made like a hand that was actually by like one motor. It was only like him and maybe like a guy in Germany who can kind of like, so I was pretty impressed. So there are a few good people in hardware, but I think in the past 10 years, that room is completely overtaken. And what's way stronger in China is the people who can do software, AI, and hardware all together. There are a lot of star engineers who can do all these. Japan, hardware, very bad at software.
So there's a good market in Japan for the physical AI startups in the US.
So I wish Japan invests. Japan is a bit, you know, the reason I talk about China and then Japan is like, I also kind of hope to convey to them, like, it's not like you can beat them like a year. You need this. China spent 20 years to accumulate the talents. You're not going to get that like the next year. So they need to be very creative in kind of how they do. If you just like spend like 100x on robotics, I'm pretty sure they're not going to be very competitive because they don't know how to pick and hire the best researchers from the US and China.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Another question, go ahead.
Appreciate for sharing. So recently, there's the CEO of Alibaba sharing the conference that the AGI is not the endpoint, and we are on the road to the ASI. So the ASS means for the artificial.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So, I just want to ask about your opinion about where are we standing with AGI and ASI?
Yeah, actually, when I drew that curve, right? Basically, the offline supervised learning 80%, 100% is AGI. ASI is basically the RO. So essentially, for math and coding, I think we're getting very close. Still bounded, right? Because like right now, they're kind of like, but essentially like for the field that you can do very high frequency RL, there's a very good chance that you can go ASI. And for other domains where the signal is more bounded, especially by human effort, kind of more like AGI or like fluctuating around AGI. But you know, to sort of put the constraint on that, like the RL's signal per compute is very, very bad. Pre-training is extremely efficient at learning. RL is very, very bad. At least the standard RL. So probably gonna take more compute than people imagine. Really kind of feel the ASI, but in some like limited domains, it's probably like early.
ASI is super intelligent, right?
Artificial, I actually call like artificial general super intelligence, because
Okay.
like first ASI was basically AlphaGo.
Okay, great. Let me do one more from Zoom. How do you think the emergence of quantum computing will affect the whole speed and quality of AI technology?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about quantum computing, actually, I should have invited him. Takuya Kitagawa.
Uh-huh.
So Takuya Kitagawa is a Japanese friend of mine, but he's basically I think the CEO, president of the quantum computing company based in Boston. He's
Okay,
like a Harvard PhD.
where, or, what is this? Never mind.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
But yeah, he'll be the great person to talk about it. I have no idea.
Okay. We are all looking forward to finding the answers to this. From the floor, I've been kind of way back in the back. Go ahead.
Yes, just one quick question about AI race. How do you see these two countries, China and in terms of access to data centers, GPUs, energy, whatever is necessary for this?
Yeah, I should look more. Actually, I will probably take a look more at the Richard professor slides later. Yeah, I kind of want to look at it, but China's energy consumption or energy generation has increased very fast. I don't know how much planning coordination that is, but even I think before the GenAI, it was kind of clear that energy production had to become scaled. And China is very good at that. I think Japan probably is going to look more into like neighboring Southeast Asian countries and then maybe like US to come partner for energy.
I think that the whole energy sector is very excited about the growth of data centers that are consuming more and more energy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's,
I mean, there's even
energy is pretty much
there's this plan to have a small fission nuclear reactor plant powering one data center.
Yeah. So in the future, like probably like it'll be like all the intermediate stacks from foundational model to GPUs to we optimize that. Probably the measurement will be, you know, intelligence per energy kind of stuff.
Yeah, I saw your hand next. Go ahead.
Curious if you think current video data sets are enough for the US to compete with Asia? And also just curious what your thoughts are on like, newer forms of those types of data.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to more egocentric data, given my background in robotics. I think maybe like some biometrics, because then you can maybe kind of sense more like emotion. Of course, it's recording the voice. Voice can really tell the signals like, oh, there's a surprising moment or that. So it's kind of like past all the multimodal kind of tracking. Actually, one of the first professor I worked with back in Toronto in undergrad was called Steve Mann. You can find his name like later, but he was like a pioneer of the Google Glasses. Before Google Glasses, he was so angry that when Google did the Google Glasses, they didn't invite him to lead that. But he was a professor at U of Toronto. He's been wearing this wearable glasses since like 30 years ago, when he was at MIT Media Lab. So I personally like it. Actually, I have a Meta glasses since like 1-2 years ago. It's really good because I can wear that and I can play like catch with my daughter, and then I can record like that data, that memory. You kind of free up your action space, right? So you can act and you can record. So I like this kind of data. In terms of like whether data is sufficient or not, I think we have to live with the data we have, or we have to kind of create a new service. There are a few companies who are like launching like generated video SNS. I'm not sure what kind of best data to generate, but yeah, definitely kind of like, if you don't have a data, the best way is to basically like do a startup and also entrepreneurship, do entrepreneurship.
So one of our Zoom watchers asks if there will ever be a company that is completely run by generative AI.
Oh, yeah,
Humans.
I want that, yeah. So,
Do you want to own it or what? What do you want?
for example, like these days, right, I kind of find the human alignment way more costly than just do the IC work with AI for some things. So when these kind of things happen, I think there could be like a single person be the CEO, then can human person.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of like kind of for AI, there was actually a discussion back like 15 years ago when blockchain and then stuff was kind of popular.
Yeah.
Basically, people were kind of talking, oh, this is the infra. So to exclude kind of human from it, I don't like that. I think the human should be part of that. I talk about basically reducing hallucination is like having the AI to live among us. I don't want the AI to be entering the capitalism by themselves.
So what do you think about responsible AI? Do you have kind of recommendations? I mean, our typical problem solving is to let the problem happen first, then regulations happen. So, ChatGPT just says it's limiting what teenagers can do with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
After problems have happened.
Yeah.
What about responsible AI from now on?
So this is kind of interesting, and then maybe we can use AI for that as well. So maybe we can kind of create sort of like a simulated sort of society
Yeah.
where we can launch the product and have like AIs be the final user for that.
Yeah.
And then see if they evolve. I think we are pretty bad at like extrapolation and then like sort of all the prediction. But when we kind of see it, we can sort of like infer the causality pretty well. So there was like a long time ago, there was a friend of mine who basically wrote at Salesforce, who wrote the AI Economist, which is kind of more like, pre-LM page, basically like, use multi-agent RL to simulate like, I think at the time was like more economic policy, but he later also did like environment policy. If this country did this, if this country did this, how do they simulate forward?
Yeah.
So I think this kind of like AI-driven simulation is going to be pretty helpful for policy making, and then we kind of use more.
Okay. Excellent. We'll take one or two more from the audience, and then I have one from Zoom that will be the last question. You go ahead, and then I'll go to you, okay? Go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's unrealistic that 95% of the workforce is going to be required. What are you going to do? But we've seen a lot of businesses are shedding. How do we solve that problem?
Yeah, I think this is a place where Japan can some leadership. So in Japan, there's a very classic economic book called basically like Teaching Confucius and Abacus. Basically, the idea is like it's by one of the earliest capitalists in Japan. But basically, the teaching is really like when you do business in Japan, you have to do both capitalism and also like moral responsibility, societal responsibility. I think this is sort of their culture. It's very ingrained into Japanese culture. In that, if you're just a greedy person who don't care about, who basically more like make mess in society, you're not gonna be respected. People won't do business with you, even you can make money for them. Japan is like not fully driven by capitalism, so I think like that's kind of one aspect I actually do wish to Japan to take more leadership on that and actually conveying that to more AI researchers, AI developers, and that. I feel US and Japan, US and China are too much in a competition. So they're much more leaning in the purest form of capitalism. So I think wearing like one kind of phrase that I really like from Jeff Hinton, that when he, I think, gave a talk like 10 years ago was, any technology that improves productivity can definitely improve human society. But whether that happens or not, it's up to the humans. I believe in that. I do feel the technology we're kind of building are fundamentally gonna enrich humanity. But I think this is why we can't really fully rely on capitalism, because I think I see a lot of winner take all from capitalism, especially these days. So I hope this kind of discussion will happen. I think everyone should do this kind of discussion. And through, we live in democracy, so through politics and through voting, we do have some empowerment to control it. Yeah, that's kind of actually one aspect I really kind of feel the US and Japan can learn from each other. Yeah.
One point. You get the last one from the floor. Go ahead.
So, how do you suppose that recent US policies that have been, kind of hostile to higher education and science and renewable energy resources, how do you suppose that will affect the AI space between the US and Asia? Will US companies keep up given how fast China has been developing?
Yeah, it's yeah, I haven't looked too much in detail. I do look at some news and bits and pieces. I don't know the full story. I do hear about limitations of H-1B kind of stuff. I do also hear, obviously there's constraints from this recent kind of policies from the US government. How this will kind of play out, hopefully it's more like interactive. Hopefully the society can kind of give more like feedback of what's kind of happening before 5 or 10 years, what we kind of know. And I think you can kind of see, right, like the people you kind of work with, the companies, the people you see in classes, right? Probably can kind of see effect relatively soon in the next few years. So I think people should definitely watch out, should always do debate discussions, and then hopefully guide the country for kind of better policy in the future. Yeah. AI market is overhyped. It has too much resource. So it's probably less affected compared to other critical areas, which definitely requires top talents, but may not have a crazy sort of valuations as AI companies. So that I'm very worried about for the US competition. AI is really living in its own world right now. So yeah.
Well said. For the last question, this is coming from a Stanford undergrad who studied a lot of CS, and he's also studied East Asian languages, has studied Japan a lot. And so he asked about what is the best kind of strategy to play a role in the adoption of AI in Japan? But when he gets his undergrad degree, jump headfirst into the Japanese tech industry, pursue a grad degree in the United States, or even wait after a grad degree and make a name for himself here, and then try to do something at a higher level in Japan.
Yeah, so these days he's currently
an undergrad.
Okay.
But he is studying CS and he has done a lot in Japan already.
So these days, top researchers and engineers don't necessarily have PhD.
Yeah.
But they all say more. Of course, there's that PhD network, right? And there's definitely that PhD kind of depth. That definitely kind of become critical. But given the abundance of information outside, and also given the abundance of information I can get from inside the frontier labs, or kind of working with top AI model builders, top AI product companies,
industry,
there's way more stuff to learn from the industry. So at least in the space of AI, grad school is too slow.
Okay. If the shoe fits, you gotta wear it.
Sorry. But you can do grad school, but I think you have to understand sort of the pace at which it's kind of happening in industry. So as a way of building network and building, especially network here, I think doing the grad school here makes is going to be helpful. But if you have an opportunity to kind of dive right into the industry, I think that's also great. One thing I do recommend, especially for young professional people in Japan, especially when they're still young, is do come to US. Do aim to come here, because I think here the amount of network, that's the kind of learning you can do, is way higher.
So you think the technical industry here would be a better option than
for AI research, right? For AI, hardcore, frontier research, what I'm talking about.
Okay. So that's great. Next week, we have Dr. Satya Dasgupta, who is the founder and CEO of a company called Edge Cortex. They're doing AI processing at the edge. And Satya, who is an ethnic Indian with Singaporean nationality, started his company in Tokyo. So we will see. They are internationalizing. They've raised about 60 or 70 million so far. So we will hear from him, and also one of his investors, Mr. Sri Dodani, will be our speakers this coming week. First of all, we do have some refreshments outside, but first of all, please join me in thanking